Good evening, and welcome to our series, War+Lovers, Making the Musical. This present television series, Making the Musical, is actually a companion program to my live stage show called War+Lovers=Why. The live stage show is a love story set during the Vietnam War. The live play is semi-autobiographical, based on my experiences as a young kid growing up in the 60s, and research I've done on the Vietnam War. So this present television series is all about the various machinations that go into developing an original Broadway play from the ground up. The title of tonight's episode is based on real events, aka special ops. You know, when you think about it, stories and people have the same problem, a little something called credibility. The main purpose of any story is to convince the people, the viewer, that the story is for real. And people have the same problem. We want people to think we're for real. We want people to trust us. And for people to believe the things that we say. And unfortunately, we all know people that don't have credibility. Those are people who speak before they think. They hear and then they say. That's where the word hearsay comes from. They're the source of a great deal of misinformation, and maybe a couple of times in the past, we've caught them lying to us. So we don't trust them. We don't believe everything they say. They don't have credibility in our world. And then hopefully we also know people who do have credibility. These are people who are intelligent, they're thoughtful, they're the source of a great deal of correct information. They do research before they develop a strong opinion. And they're smart enough to know that trust is something that can take a lifetime to build up and it can be destroyed in one moment, one action. And when we have a serious concern, a serious problem, we go to these people and we cherish their advice. So in our world, these are people that we trust, we believe them. These are people that have credibility. one of the things that I try to do in my stories that I've always done is to add some true events, some facts, a reference, some real things in my stories to give my stories credibility. I began writing screenplays in 1995 because I thought it would be a good way to get my music into the movies. And a lot of people who are serious about getting into Hollywood, they move to LA. That way you can network, you can rub shoulders with people that are trying to do the same things that you do. You're privy to inside information, and you're available. If something comes up, you're right there. So I didn't want to move to New York because by 95 I'd been in New York for about 15 years. So instead of moving there, I decided, I'll hire script doctors who are based in Hollywood. So over 10 years, I worked with about a half dozen script doctors. They were all helpful, but some more helpful than others because they all have their own specialties. And I remember on my 7th screenplay, I was on the phone with one of my consultants, and the first scene in my screenplay was a real event taken right out of the news. And the consultant said to me, "James, I wish you wouldn't do that." And I thought to myself, why not? At what point did America become so divided? After World War II, we were all together, but then came Vietnam. Let me tell you a story about the time the people of Camelot began to fight among themselves. 1 piano, 2 lovers, 3 armies, 1 Vietnam. About 10 years ago, I was watching TV and this movie came on called Field of Dreams with Kevin Costner. And Mr. Costner played a young urban professional, I think it was from Chicago, but he took ownership of a farm, I think it was in Iowa. And in one of the early scenes, he's in the middle of the cornfield and he hears this voice. And sometimes we call it Deus Ex Machina, sometimes they call it the voice of God, whatever. But he hears this voice and it says, "If you build it, they will come." And I thought to myself, if that's the premise of the movie, that's ridiculous. I don't accept it. I turned it off, turned the channel. A couple years later, I saw it again, and I thought, I really didn't give that movie much of a chance, and I've liked a lot of the things that Mr. Costner has done. So I'll give it another chance, watch a little further. And as I began to watch it, I realized that it was a fascinating story based on real events. Very early in professional baseball, the players didn't make very much. Some of them even played for room and board, and many of them had to have day jobs during the off season. So they were susceptible to bribery from the gambling syndicates. And there's this one group, about 8 players who were implicated in throwing the World Series, and they were all kicked out of baseball for life. But one of the younger players, the youngest player, baseball was his life. He played great in the series. He didn't throw anything. Apparently, he accepted a little bit of money, so he was banished for life, and it was just, baseball was all he lived for. It was very, very sad. And this story was kind of a fairy tale story of redemption for this young man. And it was just even though it was based in this fairy tale kind of template, because it had based on a real story, the story had credibility. My third year in college, during winter break, things weren't going that well because I really didn't have passion for what I was studying, and I was in kind of a difficult engineering track, and I wasn't flunking out, but I just wasn't into it. I was doing it for other people, not for me. And I just happened to find the music for pictures at an exhibition, which is a piano classic written in like 1879, I think, by Modest Mussorgsky. And about a year before, Emerson, Lake and Palmer had a hit with that, playing it on Hammond organ. Those were in the college radio days. And so I took that music in, because I had a background taking piano lessons, I was able to learn it in a month or so. And I thought to myself, I can do this, but I need a better instrument. So I went from my college town into the capital and went to the largest cathedral in the middle of town, and went in there. They had like $100,000 pipe organ which covered the whole wall. And I said, I'm an organist. Can I practice on your instrument? And they said, yes. So after a couple of weeks, I got a couple of friends, got a reel-to-reel tape recorder, and hung a couple of stereo mics. I made this incredible recording. And I thought, I can do this. I can be a professional musician. So I took a job in a nightclub, and I met a couple of musicians who had friends in New York. So I called them up. They said, yeah, come on over. So I sold my bike, I sold my stereo, we got all the money together I could. I took a plane ticket. This is in the middle of a spring semester. Took the plane down to New York. I'm on 44th Street looking at where the record companies are, and I called the guys up and they say, yeah, come on over. We're halfway across the island in Long Island. Okay, so I get out there and they have this big house. There's 5 musicians, and they're all, they say, hey, we got extra room here, fine. And they were very nice. They let me play their instruments. After about a week, I realized these guys are not going to drop everything and help me with my career. They're worried about their own career. So I called up an A&R guy, and I got him on the phone and talked to him. I said, I got this great tape. And he said, well, we don't really put bands together. Okay, so after a couple of weeks, I started to run out of money, so I went back, took the plane back and went back to school, finished spring semester. And so that summer, I'm thinking, this is going to be a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. It's what I call the rubber hits the road type of situation, where you thought you could do something and you run in there and you hit into a brick wall. And I thought, I'm going to have to get a job. I'm going to have to buy a Hammond organ. I'm going to have to hire musicians. I'm going to have to write music, original music. I can't just play something else that somebody else wrote. And I'm going to need to rent the studio and produce it. This is going to take years. And do I really want to do this? So I still remember the one night on Grand River Avenue. I look up, I see this full moon. I say, I'm going to do this. But at that moment, if you would have come to me and said, James, what's show business? I would have said, oh, show business, well, that's dancing girls in Las Vegas. I didn't think I was going into show business. I just thought I was going to be playing accomplished music on stage as a musician. But I've since learned as the years went by that if you're on stage and you're selling tickets, it doesn't matter if you're at Madison Square Garden, if you're at Carnegie Hall, or if you're in a black box theater in the Lower East Side, you're in show business. So that was one thing that I was very naive about. And there was something else that I was very naive about. There was another movie that, although it was an historical drama, taught me something very important about present-day show business. It was a movie called A Knight's Tale. It had one of Heath Ledger's last movies, and it was just an amazing movie. It was about jousting, and everything in it was related to something that was really true. There really was jousting. The royals really did participate. They were sometimes really injured. They really did put guys in the stocks if they were bad people. You couldn't participate if you weren't of noble birth. And all these things in it that were real. Geoffrey Chaucer was a real person. Prince Edward was a real person. If an historian came to me now and said, James, will Sir Ulrich was actually a real person, I believe it, because there's so much in that movie that was real that I believe he was a real person. But there was something in there that really illuminated something very important to me, and that was this idea of the herald. Paul Bettany's performance was just incredible. He played the herald, and I realized that I had always known about that word, but I never really knew what it meant. I'd never really analyzed it. At Christmas you have the herald angels. Okay, I'd heard the word, but I thought a herald was an angel with a trumpet. I had no idea what it really was. What a herald is someone who announces you, someone who presents you, someone who supports you, someone who promotes you. And in that movie, if Sir Ulrich didn't have Geoffrey Chaucer as the herald, there wouldn't have been a movie, because Will would have been watching the jousts from the cheap seats. He would not have been able to participate at all. He would not have had a career. That's how important the herald was to that movie, and that's also how important the herald can be in the present-day show business, because we have heralds today, too, that just go by different names. A herald can be a manager, a herald can be a director, a herald can be a producer, a herald can be a critic who mentions the actor in an article. It can be an award that's won, perhaps Best Actor in a film festival. It can also be a Grammy, an Emmy, that's on the higher level, Tony, all that. Those are all forms of heralds. But without a herald, it's very, very difficult to have a career, because the herald actually is our secondary title for tonight's special ops. What a herald can do is provide opportunity. And I never saw a movie star that didn't get a break early in its career with a movie. I never saw a band that had a gold record without getting a recording contract. I never saw somebody in any kind of show business activity find success without getting a break at some point, without being introduced and announced by somebody somewhere in some way. I went to see the production of Miss Saigon at the Broadway Theater a few years ago, and to be honest, I didn't really like the opening, and the reason I didn't is because it made it look like war was a 9-to-5 job, and the soldiers went out on patrol 9 to 5, and then came back at night and went to the brothels, and that's not really what war is like. So it did, in that world of that story, it kind of felt like that. And the the idea of the guy falling in love with someone that he met, and okay, you know, I didn't really feel that that was that strong of a story. So halfway through the first act, I didn't really enjoy it that much. And then came the dancing and the music, and I never realized how much dancing contributes to a live show. Because when you see dancing on TV, you know, it's a little different. It's not the same impression. It's like listening to an acoustic, like someone playing solo violin or solo acoustic guitar or solo piano. It doesn't come across that well on the TV. But if you're there and you can feel the strings vibrate and you can see the artist close up, it's a completely different experience. And I'd seen other plays with dancing before, but because I was a little not that crazy about the storyline for a few different reasons, having done so much research and there wasn't any dialogue in it, it was just what they call a sung-through musical. And for me, it just, what it didn't say could fill volumes. Like the Pentagon Papers, I don't think it had nothing that was in the Pentagon Papers was in that production. But the way the dancing uplifted that production was just amazing. And before that, by then was just getting ready to do my latest series of shows, which started about 3 years ago. And I decided, because I had all these piano compositions, and I just decided, hey, we'll have a dancer go ahead and dance during those piano compositions. And it just turned out to be a wonderful, lucky, fortunate decision, because every production we've done, everyone comes to me and say, you know, we love the music with the dancing, and everyone says that. So even if they think it's more political or more this or more that than it really is, sometimes people don't quite get your message that well, especially when I'm doing it in a very small theater and we can talk afterwards, and sometimes people will get up and they don't really get the idea that I'm trying to put across. But everyone seems to understand the music and the dancing, so that has been worked out wonderfully. So that is something that's I think a big part of my spoonful of sugar in this production, is that my original compositions, which are influenced by composers like Mussorgsky and Ravel and some of the expressionists and the impressionists, that's sort of the angle I'm coming from with the solo keyboard. And then the dancing with that, that's sort of my sugar to make the overall production to be as entertaining as possible.
Thank you.